Hey there, what's up, doctors? This is Bill MacDonald, the writing doc. And today I'm going to use the word doc because when you're doing editing and revising, you're either working on the conventions, improving the conventions with editing, or improving the content with revising. Convention starts with a T, but what is content? Content is the organization, how a passage or a sentence or a word or a phrase is organized, or how it's developed. So when you put those three letters together, you get the word doc. We're going to look at only two questions today, and both of them had to do with one letter of cups that we talked about this morning in the video, the P for punctuation. So before I show you the question, I just want to show you what happens when you don't have good conventions, the editing. All right. Now, instead of showing you the answers, some of you I saw were asking about essay questions. Well, don't start with essays if you haven't even begun doing constructed, extended, or open answer, short answer responses. We've got to get to one land before we try to get to two land and three land. So think of the red light as the question that comes in a sentence and the answer that also comes in a sentence. So if you look down below in the guide for the 1, 2, 3 with WWE that all of you guys got, it does say very clearly what is the question. And the question is always in the form of a sentence. Okay. And if we're only trying to get 1 point, all we have to do is answer the question with that first W that you see there. Based on the question, what is the answer? And when you're looking at questions that are open-ended, like we're going to turn this multiple choice into, it says, look for words like what, W, who, when, where, why, which, how, ends with a W, in the question or the prompt or topic, but we're just focusing on the question right now, okay? So what is the answer? Well, for math problems, the open-ended have already started in the form of a number that you place on a grid. But for today's answers, we're going to, for the first one, use a phrase and a sentence to answer the question. And it would be picking from the passage what's wrong. And we'll be able to do that just by doing some highlighting to practice what they're going to get. And so in order to earn that point, they just have to find the phrase or write the phrase that's correct, or click on a drop down phrase. As you can see, there's a drag and drop, there's tables, there's graphs, but in this case, all we're gonna do is be able to, we just need to write a phrase or a sentence, and we'll be able to answer the question that is being asked. So if you look at it, it says the magic words, what change, keyword, should be made in sentence 29. It didn't say sentences 1 through 28. It didn't say anything after 29. It just said sentence 29. So in order to be good at editing that sentence, I only need to look at that sentence. So the question says, what change should be made in sentence 29, singular? And all I have to do is figure out for my answer the change that has to be made. And because this is editing, I want to remind you that editing is improving the conventions and revising is improving the content, called the development and organization. For you 3rd through 8th grade teachers, if your students get the field test items this year. They're either going to get 6 questions in one revising passage, or they'll get 2 shorter passages that will have about 3 questions each in editing. So watch what happens if you have the word doc without the C. We get do, as in do. Writing without good conventions is basically poop. And that's what we've been getting. I'm sorry to say it that way, but we've been getting a lot of poop in terms of the quality of the conventions. And so because of that, I'm going to be teaching you in these 2 questions. This question only got 50% correct in Texas in April, and the other one we're going to look at only got 33%, and they both had to do with dialogue. And so that means that not enough dialogue was practiced with your students, or it wasn't taught in a way that they'll remember. So I read the question. I'm going to read it in the passage. I underlined something in the question. I'm going to underline something in the passage and in the question. I'm going to label, and in this case, I labeled with a bracket and highlighted. I also labeled question 15 because a lot of students will get confused. So you need to tell them, make sure if you're going to be using paper, you can do it right there on the paper. If you're doing a computer, it's still being decided how much annotation you're going to be allowed to do, but your students can still write down in their notes on paper, because you're allowed to ask for as much paper as you want. Sentence 29, make a little bracket, question 15. That way we don't go to sentence number 15, because question 15 is asking about sentence 29. So we label, then we'll start to evaluate. Since there's nothing to eliminate, because I covered the answer choices, we're going to decide which is the answer, which monkey is the phrase or the sentence that is needed to make the change in sentence 29. Okay, now before I show it to you, I want to do a little mini lesson so you can understand a new way to teach cups. All right, as you can see here, we said that editing a passage is cups, and since we saw the word change, we automatically will write cups. And every single time since STAAR has started, you Texas teachers, cups is either a mistake in capitalization, usage, punctuation, or spelling. All right, the one that I want to focus on is the P of cups, because it has to do with dialogue. So you notice that I have 3 red periods. Every sentence is like a street with a stop sign at the end. That's red. And then we have some slowing down sentences called commas, apostrophes, contractions, colons, semicolons. The upper grades, you'll be teaching that to your students to slow the sentence down. There'll be an independent clause on this side, followed by a colon and a phrase, or a semicolon and an independent clause. And then finally, we have what we're going to talk about today, dialogue, where somebody said something, and then we have the 5 Cuhs. Cuh, cuh, comma, cuh, cuh, quotation, cuh, cuh, capital. 3 Cuhs that happen right in a row, and then whatever they said, whatever came out of their mouth, cuh, cuh, closing, close the street, close the sentence, because we're done talking in this case, and we're done with the sentence. And then cuh, cuh, quotation. So there's 5 Cuhs in a normal dialogue sentence. If I flip the folder over to the opposite side, down to the bottom left, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different ways that dialogue could be tested depending on grade level. Did they say something first and then use the tag, the said word and the person? Or did they give us the tag and then say something? Did they say something and then the tag? Did they give us the tag in the middle? How did we do that? Did they give us the tag uh, at the beginning? Did they give us the tag in the middle? So what I did for you was put several different ways so your kids can practice. And since these are examples, I would highly suggest you have your kids practice, because the 2 questions about dialogue in 4th grade got 50% correct and only 33% correct. One more thing I want to show you in the binder, for those of you that have the binder, you'll be able to practice using page 135 in the punctuation section. There's a large poster version so your kids could draw this themselves, where we have the same thing but an enlarged version. So and so said, any said word, that's the tag, comma, quotation, capital, whatever they said, whatever came out of their mouths, exact words, closing, either a period, an exclamation, or a question mark, a stop sign, and then quotation, the 5 Cuhs of dialogue. So keeping in mind that when we go look at this sentence, it could have been any mistake when you use the graphic organizers. All your kids need to do is draw a hand and write cups on the hand. And if the question says what change, it has to be capitalization, usage with Spider-Man, subject verb agreement, punctuation, or spelling. So we've got the red punctuations, the stop signs. I'm going to put this comma on the table, a shorter bounce for a shorter pause if we have a little ball, colons for the upper grades, and semicolons. Those are resting on the line. That's why we're pretending that's a line there. And then up in the air, we have what's called apostrophes or contractions. And then we have what we'll be talking about today, the yellow opening and closing quotations before and after you talk. So this was a huge problem for the students in 4th grade. So I would imagine that if you teach 3rd through 7th grade, even 8th grade, your kids might have a problem with it. So why don't we go ahead and take a look. It says sentence number 29. So let's go back, and here I've labeled it. I opened my bracket at the beginning, and I didn't close the bracket after sentence 29. And I noticed I have it highlighted in pink. That's the closest I could get to red. The reason I didn't close the bracket is because the person's not done talking here in this sentence. So I would make sure that my kids notice, oh, it's okay to start talking in one sentence, comma, quotation, capital, close the sentence, start talking again with a capital, and not close your sentence and put your other quotation until you're done talking on the second sentence. So if red means what is the change that's needed, we might have to go green, go forward, and take a look at the next sentence by doing what I call the Michael J. Fox Back to the Future. Or we might have to go backwards and say, oh, let's take a look at the sentence before. Well, in this case, I don't need to go backwards. Beep, beep, beep. I need to go forwards and say, okay, what connection do 29 and sentence 30 have? It's spoken dialogue by the character. So let me go ahead and read it, and you should probably verbalize. It's nice and close for you with this fancy camera that one of you was nice enough to buy for me since my other one broke. Capital. he says, comma, quotation, where's the capital? We are fashioning this life from scratch, period. Okay, continuing the dialogue, capital, go, comma, find a stick, comma, and make something, closing. There's my stop sign. The dialogue is done, and there's my quotation. So because this was 2 consecutive sentences of dialogue, that's why I did that. And so the mistake is going to be insert a comma. So sorry, insert, change the lower, change we to capital we. Now, if you say what change needs to be made in sentence 29, you can use the word change because they asked you about a change. Or you can use a phrase. You could say we to capital we. And the reader, if it's open-ended, is going to be able to see, oh, they did make the change. They don't have to use the word change because we already know what our question is, what change. I just want the answer to your question. So if I ask you, why do I like pickles? And you say, why do I like pickles? You can say, I really love them because their sour taste just makes this amazing flavor in my mouth that I enjoy every time I go to a movie. Now, yes, you can restate if you want to. I like pickles because, or I enjoy pickles, I adore pickles. Change a word, that way we can practice thinking outside the box, all right? So why am I saying that? Because as part of your answer, you can restate or repeat what are some of the words in the question that I can use. You can rephrase by saying, oh, what are some other words? Could I change at least one word? Or what other way could I start my sentence? Okay. You could change the order by saying the word we needs to be changed to capital we. And so all you're doing there is changing the order of the words. So what other way can I start my sentence? You don't have to say the change that needs to be made is. No. You can tell me the change and then you can use the word change if you want to. Okay. So when we look at the answer choices, I'm hoping that's going to be there. I'm going to cover it up. There it is. Change we to capital we. And as you can see, only half of the students in Texas chose that answer. And the big distractor was change says to say apostrophe S. Okay. I've never seen that in my life in my brain. So I would look that up to see if that's even possible. And so let's go look at this big distractor to find out why would so many people put an apostrophe with says on that sentence there. Here it is. He says, say apostrophe S. Usually if you're going to put an apostrophe S, it's going to be owning the next word if it's possessive, and you can't own a comma, a quotation, or a capital. So he says present tense because the previous sentence, if you look at it, is in present tense. He hopes, present tense. And so if you want to use the yellow, you can say the reason we don't use said or say with apostrophe S, we're not owning anything. We wouldn't use said because this previous sentence is in present tense, the one before it is in present tense, and the one after it is telling them to do something right now. They're telling them that right now to do something in the future. And so why is this green? Because we want to move forward and look at it. Let's look at the other one, number 23. The reason it was a struggle was because there were 3 dialogue sentences in a row. And so what change should be made in sentence 34? Again, when you see the word change, we're going to read the word, the sentence softly or loudly. We'll underline change, we'll label sentence 34, and then we can label that we are doing question number 23. So we'll have to go to sentence 34. That is cups. If you remember on the writing folder that I showed you, that's rule number 1. So your kids know it's only going to be capitalization, usage, punctuation, or spelling. And again, it happens to be a problem with dialogue. So when we go look at it, we're going to go look and see what was the issue where they had trouble with sentence 34 in the passage. Put you right here. All right. Now, they asked about sentence 34, so that's why I colored that sentence red. What change, the question says, needs to be made in sentence 34? And so the answer to get a point would need to be whatever the change is. Now, a lot of us have taught kids do not start with the word and or but. So this probably threw your kids off, and a lot of them chose change a capital and to lowercase and. But if you cover up this word and the sentence that's left still makes sense by itself, it's perfectly allowed. That same rule applies with the conjunction but. It's because of the Colorado River and the caves down below, Marcos explained. The other choice was put a comma after Colorado River. Well, if it's a compound subject, if it's because of 2 things, if it's a compound, well, it's like an object, Colorado River and the caves down below. Since that's only 2 things, that would be me holding in my hand the 2 things. And so here's what the problem is. I'm going to get a yellow monkey and say, they're asking me to put a quotation on D, but I've got to see, and I can see that there's a tag there that someone's talking in a said word, but let's go to the previous sentence so that we can see, did someone start talking? It's because there are so many different plants and animals living there. Well, there's no opening quotation yet, so I have to rewind. And for those of you that were asking me through Messenger, these are $1 at the Dollar Tree, and you can get 12 of these monkeys for visual kinesthetic learners. Move back one more sentence. It's because of towering cliffs and colorful rocks. So there it is. Somebody started talking. So there's the opening quotations. You can see, we can call it the opening dimples. And it doesn't necessarily start with a tag. It just tells us that Marcos is about ready to talk. Marcos, the person, and this everything uses spoke. And so he speaks for 3 sentences in a row. So because he's done there, closing, we close with a comma because we haven't used the tag in the sentence, and then we put a quotation because we're done talking. Now, if you have a potato head, there's Marcos talking, and he began talking in sentence 32, opening dimples, opening quotations. Stop the sentence for a moment, continue talking, no opening or closing dimples or quotations. He finished talking in sentence 34, so closing quotations, and then the tag Marcos explained. So the answer to number 23 is going to be to put those closing quotations, insert closing quotations after the comma. That's the closing. We're closing the dialogue, and then we put quotation because Marcos is done speaking after sentences 32, 33, and 34. And as you can see, only 1/3 of the students in Texas got it right because they were trying to put a comma after the Colorado River because of the word and that was there. And you can only use a comma if with and if there are three things. So 3 things or more. So remember that rule, Colorado River, Colorado, if this is the Colorado River, and I can bob my head because we're talking about 2 things, I don't need a comma. So that's what half of your kids did. And I think what's happening is they're being told every time you see the word and put a comma. No, check and see how many items are in the series. And in this case, there were only 2. So there you have it. That's my 5 Cuhs strategy. And I used a combination of the writing folder, the graphic organizer. I even used page, what was that? Page, for those of you that, so many of you that have it, there's thousands of you that have the binder. Page 135, have your kids write that down and then practice on the bottom of the writing folder the 6 different ways. There's not really 6, but there's 6 different examples of talking where we put the tag at the beginning and then what we say, put the tag at the end and have what we say first, and then put the tag in the middle and have the person talking in the front and in the back. So please like this video on YouTube. If you have friends who don't have Facebook, please do me a huge favor and share or tag your 3rd through 8th grade students. And for those of you in high school who also have to be teaching dialogue, this is appropriate for any grade level. All grade levels have to be able to learn how to use correct capitalization and punctuation. So I'll close with a statement verbalizing my capitalization and punctuation because it's easier to talk, compare and contrast, than it is to write. Okay. Bill exclaimed, comma, quotation, capital. That's, in my ball up in the air because I'm going to separate because of that apostrophe there. That is the end of our lesson. Closing. And then because I exclaimed, I'll probably use my exclamation mark, also known as exclamation. And I'm done talking, so I need my quotation. Practice that. Talking first. My students, when they were in my classroom, because we had to learn capitalization before punctuation, because capitalization can be taught with words and phrases, and some punctuation can only be taught with sentences. I always taught capitalization before punctuation. And that's how the binder set up all the capitalization rules, lots of practice with capitalization, open-ended, using actual student sentences written by students with lots of mistakes. Then there's some multiple choice, single sentence, what change should be made. And there's not a whole passage, there's not even a whole paragraph. It's just 10 different tests where your kids can practice looking at one sentence because those 2 questions were only asking us to look at one sentence And they just had to be able to tell, oh, someone's talking here. Let me make sure I see where the opening and the closing quotation marks go, and the comma that goes with them, and the capital. So we need those 5 Cuhs of dialogue. Good luck, you guys. God bless. Please share or tag your reading and writing teacher friend.